So the first match for the All Blacks of 2024 and also of the Scott Robertson era is in the books. 16 points to 15, the victory over England. And in this video, we're going to decide, were there players that could have done more throughout that matchup? Are there certain men that should be switched out for other players heading into that second test as well? But overall, it was a great test match. Very close between the two sides. England had some great stats across the board in terms of the tackling numbers for certain players. New Zealand, great stat when it came to the territory, having a lot more of the ball than England. But like I said in this video, we are doing our All Blacks XP. Now, this is not what I believe Scott Robertson will select. This is what I would if I was somehow given the reins as All Blacks coach. But of course, that will never happen. And that's probably a good thing. If you thought Ian Foster's record was bad, you wait till I take over the All Blacks. Looking at the front row. For myself, I would go with Ethan de Groot as the number 1, Cody Taylor number 2, and Tyrell Lomax as the number 3. I feel like you can't change too much in these positions, definitely because as the match wore on, it actually seemed like they started finding their rhythm a little bit more. They were penalised in the very first scrum of the game, but after that started to find their momentum a little bit more. Ethan de Groot at 1. The other options that you have got are Ofa Tuangafasi, who did come off the bench in last week's game, or you've got Tamaiti Williams as another player who could take on that number 1 jersey. Now for England in that number 1 spot, unfortunately they did suffer that early injury of Joe Marler, but it meant that Finn Baxter got the opportunity, the young Harlequins prop, and he actually made 14 tackles throughout that match and also didn't look too bad in the scrums. They were pretty competitive on a whole throughout the contest. Number 2, I mentioned that I would go with Cody Taylor. Now I was extremely close to putting a Safar Moore in that jersey just because his physicality seemed to be something that the All Blacks at times throughout that game up against England were potentially lacking. And Safar Moore, he's about as physical as they come for the Hurricanes throughout Super Rugby Pacific. So I would have loved to see him there. And I'm very close to switching it now. But I think for now, I'm going to leave Cody Taylor. Maybe later on in the video, we may switch it to a Safar Moore. But for now, I'm going Cody Taylor. You want to have that accuracy at line-out time. Although, to be fair, Safar Moore's line-outs once again this year have gone pretty decently for the Hurricanes. And speaking of the Hurricanes, Tyrell Lomax, that number 3 jersey, I feel like he is the option that you should go with in this match, unless you want to go with Fletcher Null for a bit more in the scrums early on. Now, Lomax by no means is a bad scrummager, but Fletcher Null, if you look at the two of them, I would say that Null is more of a specialist in the scrums, whereas Tyrell Lomax, he is still very solid, but he also offers a little bit more when it comes to that running game, which you don't really get from Fletcher Null. So that is why I go with Lomax in that starting lineup. Now we move on to the locks, though. And this is relatively tricky. You've got the captain, Scott Barrett, who was playing for last game, and also Patrick Tuipulotu. He was playing number 5, but for the whole of Super Rugby Pacific, he found himself more so in that number 4 jersey. So for this game, I have got Scott Barrett once again as the number 4, but I have gone with Tupou Vaa'i as the number 5. I felt like Vaa'i looked very strong off the bench for the All Blacks in that last game, seemed to be straight away into the action. And another reason that I would go with Vaa'i in the starting lineup is to have that Tuipulotu experience coming off the bench later on in the game. Because, of course, the All Blacks, at this stage, they can't lose the series. But that does not mean that they don't want to win it. They will want to make it 2-0. And the best way to do that, I believe, is to have a couple experienced guys coming off the bench late to just help control the game. Definitely if the tactic, like it was in the first test, is to go into that kicking-orientated battle up against the English. Because both sides, let's be honest, they didn't want to give away a penalty inside of their own half with the slight chance that it could lead to the opposition being able to win the game. So that is why I go with Tupou Vaa'i in the starting lineup. Actually helped New Zealand win that last penalty, as controversial as it may have been. He was in there and he was able to help the ABs get that pen. But I think Scott Barrett, you can either go with him or you can go with Tuipulotu in that number 4 jersey. I've even heard rumours that some people would put Scott Barrett at number 6 for this game, just to add an extra jumper and also just to have Scott Barrett's physicality matching up against Chandler Cunning himself, who had a tremendous game for England last Saturday. But I've gone with Scott Barrett and I have gone with Tupou Vaa'i. In terms of the loose forward trio, I feel like there isn't a huge amount you can change here, although I have made one switch, and that is in the number 6 jersey. Now don't get me wrong, Samipeni Finau, he had a solid game, but did he have a game to the same caliber as the English loose forward trio? When you look at him versus Chandler Cunningham South, you say that Cunningham South had the better performance. When you look at Papali'i and Sam Underhill, a lot would say that Sam Underhill had the better performance, even though Dalton Papali'i, I did see he was the leading tackler for the All Blacks, making an extra, I believe, 6 more tackles than any of the other players with a total of 15. But inside of the top 10 tacklers, Dalton Papali'i was the only man with an All Blacks logo next to him. The rest were all English. Now, there's an easy way to work out why that is, and that is because the All Blacks had a lot more of the ball than the English did, but I thought we would have seen someone like a Finau or a Savia possibly inside of that top 10 as well, just because at the end of the day, you got to try and outwork the English, definitely in this second test match, and a man who does extremely well when it comes to working, as long as he hasn't got an injury, is my number 6, Ethan Blackadder. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go with him. Maybe Luke Jacobson might be the other option that they go with, but I would go with Blackadder. You know he's a workhorse. You know he's going to match up well with the Sam Underhill or a Chandler Cunningham South. So that is why I go with him as the number 6. Finau, he didn't really do a lot wrong throughout the game. Like I said, it's just the fact that I want someone that we're going to see in a few more breakdowns and someone who can clean out Maro Itoje from those breakdowns, as he had way too many opportunities to get the turnovers for the English. But number 7, I have stuck with Dalton Papali'i. Like I said, he made 15 tackles. He did what he needed to. I don't think I saw him in too many breakdowns trying to get those turnovers. That could have also been from the lack of possession that the English did have. But it didn't really seem like he had the role of a jackler throughout the 80 minutes up against England in test number 1. So I'd like to see 1 or 2 more attempts from Papali'i in match number 2. Ardie Savia, he is going to be my number 8 here. I feel like any time he takes to the field, you can just see his class when he is out there. The fact that he was able to still get a couple turnovers, he was unlucky with one of those passes that did drift forward to Damian McKenzie, because that was going to be a great line break opportunity for the All Blacks, but he wasn't quite able to get it right there. But a lot of what else he did on the field, he was able to get right, and he just didn't look like he had been playing in Japan. A lot of the other guys who play overseas normally a little bit slower to get back into their work. Savia, I feel like he's only going to get better from where he is now, which is great news for that All Blacks fullback. He also offers you an option at the line-out, which I think is crucial up against England once again. A man's name's going to be thrown around here, Maro Itoje. In terms of those line-outs, you have to try and go somewhere that he is not, because he is very strong at being able to get those turnovers. Another reason that I would go with Savia is because Ben Earl, for the English, he is absolutely phenomenal. His work rate is insane. He made about 17 tackles for England, but he was actually 4th on the list, which is crazy to think that he only registered as number 4 in the tackling stats. At the top, it was Ollie Lawrence as well as Jamie George, both making 19. Then George Martin, the lock for the English, making 18. And then it was Ben Earl with his 17, although he did make the most carries out of any player for the English, having 24, which was very impressive from that man. So Savia, he's going to have to match that work rate of Ben Earl, which I think he can do, and a lot of people, of course, would back him to be able to do so, but I've kept him in that fullback. No space just yet for Wallace Satiti, but up against Fiji, that is the game I think we're going to see that man start. But looking through now at the back line, now there was the injury of TJ Perenara. It has been updated that TJ will not be available for this matchup. Noah Hotham actually joining the squad as injury cover, the young Crusaders halfback, but he is not going to be in my starting XB. He also isn't going to be in my 23-man side. At number 9, I have gone with Finlay Christie. I feel like that is the safer option. At the end of the day, he played last week up against the English, coming off the bench in that game. His kicking was solid. He almost got himself a turnover, so I would put Finlay Christie in the starting lineup. Now, they have also got the other option of Cortez Ratima. Maybe they want to mix it up a little bit and have him starting at 9 with Damian McKenzie as the 10. Have that Chiefs combination, but it would be a massive responsibility for Cortez Ratima to make his All Blacks debut in a match like this. But maybe that's exactly what they will consider doing. But for myself anyway, I have gone with Finlay Christie, and then in that number 10 jersey, I have gone with Damian McKenzie. Other than the kicking tee, I didn't feel like McKenzie did too much wrong. He actually had 17 carries throughout that match up against the English. His running was solid. He managed to get that cross-kick try assist for Sevu Reece. His kicking was the one thing that probably let him down, and some would argue if you're there as the fly half and you are going to have the goal kicking tee, that is one of your main responsibilities as a player out on that field. But I think that McKenzie, he will get better as the season progresses. We've got to remember, throughout that Rugby World Cup, he was always seen as the third option. So for him to finally get that chance to start for the ABs, as much experience as he has at Super Rugby level, as well as a little bit for the All Blacks, he doesn't have a whole heap of experience of starting, and not in that 10 jersey. He's had a lot more time at 15 for the ABs, so it will take time, but I am backing him once again to get himself the start. And at the second test match, now we move on to the centres. Jordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane were the combination that the All Blacks went with. And even though they both had, I would say, all right games, I don't think either of them had a truly phenomenal performance in that first test. Ollie Lawrence was one of the main reasons for that. He was very good at getting up early and managing to make the nice quick tackle. The English rush defence in general were also causing quite a few problems for the All Blacks. It meant that rather than going through the hands with the centres, it was more so a skip pass from either Damian McKenzie or Jordie Barrett to get it out wide to Reece and to Leah, which meant that Rieko Ioane, even though he had a few runs, he didn't get anywhere near as many as if the English defence hadn't been rushing up the way that they were. So the All Blacks have to try and counter that. And one way that I've decided I'm going to counter that is actually change who is in that number 13 jersey. Now, I have stuck with Jordie Barrett as my number 12. I feel like his kicking, I would like to see a little bit more of those up and unders in the second match, because the All Blacks, they were kicking it away a little bit aimlessly in the first test match. Too much distance on it, giving Marcus Smith and George Furbank a license to just run it up to the halfway line and then create that counter-attack. There was actually a try that came for England, and it was all because of a TJ Perenara box kick that went too far. It was uncontested, England taking it, and then they made about 80 metres, were able to kick it into the corner off an All Blacks penalty, and then they were able to drive over for that try of Amaro Atoje. So I would like to see maybe a little bit of kicking from Jordie Barrett, but it has to be contestable. That's the big difference for the All Blacks in this match. They can't just kick it away aimlessly. They have to have intent behind it, that they are going to be able to retain that ball and make those meters along the way as well. But number 12, I've stuck with Jordie Barrett. Number 13, I've gone with Anton Lienert-Brown. Now, that might not be very popular because, of course, Rieko Ioane at international level, he has a phenomenal record for the All Blacks. Throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season for the Blues, he did not score a single try. And for the All Blacks this year, if he's not careful, he might almost fall into that same boat. Rieko Ioane, he's been good, but he hasn't been great. And I feel like you need someone in that number 13 jersey who has been in great form. And that is exactly why I would pick Anton Lienert-Brown. He has had his best season ever for the Chiefs throughout Super Rugby Pacific. They've also got the option of Billy Proctor. But the reason I went with Anton Lienert-Brown is because he's got that little bit more size. And I feel like when you're matching up with Ollie Lawrence, if you have Jordie Barrett on the inside and Anton Lienert-Brown on the outside, you've got two men who can muscle the ball forward. And Ollie Lawrence, even though he made the most tackles out of any English player, he cannot make those two tackles at once, which then means you put the pressure on Slade, you put the pressure on whoever is on the outside, because you've also got your wingers who are able to make those meters as well. So that is why I go with Anton Lienert-Brown. I would have Rieko Ioane coming off the bench, though, to add that late pace for the ABs and just add a bit more explosiveness off the bench for the All Blacks as well. But now we've only got the back three remaining. Number 11, I've gone with Caleb Clarke. Now, Mark Taleo, I didn't think did too much wrong throughout that game up against the English. His attack was solid. He had a nice clean break, almost got himself a try. But I think that in this game, one thing that was pretty obvious between the All Blacks and England was that England were the more physical side out of the two. The All Blacks still won the game, though. But they won it by 1 point, and I feel like this next game they would like to win it a little bit more convincingly and a little bit more confidently than just having that very narrow margin. Caleb Clarke, throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season, he was phenomenal. Most clean breaks in the competition, having over 1,000 running meters for the Blues. If that man is out on the field and his rib is 100%, that is the one concern and maybe the one reason that they wouldn't go with Caleb Clarke in this game. But he was warming up with the All Blacks before that last game, so that makes me think he's pretty close to that 100% mark. No pun intended, but I would put him out on that left wing ahead of Mark Talia, and he's also got that ability of getting under the high ball and being able to catch it. Now, Talia, I thought, did that pretty well up against the English, but there were times when there were kicks downfield and Talia was jogging after it, and then it just left a huge amount of space for England to be able to counter-attack. Clarke, he's shown it throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season. He's upped his work rate, and I feel like if you have him chasing full steam ahead after that ball when it's being kicked high, England won't be as keen to run it forward, mainly because they'll have a Caleb Clarke right in their face, ready to put in that big shot. So Caleb Clarke, left wing, right wing. I feel like this one doesn't really need to be debated. Sevu Reece is who I would have out on that right wing. I felt like he was very strong up against the English, managed to score that first try off the cross kick from Damian McKenzie. Also had a very crucial 50-22 when the All Blacks were deep inside of their own half. Sevu Reece was able to get that kick way downfield, and it gave the All Blacks a lot of territory. But his work in the breakdown, we didn't get to see it too much, mainly because England's clean-out was very strong in the breakdowns. But this game, I think Sevu Reece once again needs that opportunity at right wing, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is what the All Blacks go with. But that just leaves us with number 15. Really, there are two options in this jersey, Beauden Barrett or Stephen Perofeta. Perofeta starting in that first test match up against the English, ahead of Beauden Barrett, which some people were sceptical of. But honestly, Stephen Perofeta, I think he proved a lot of people wrong with the way that he played up against England. He was in the fight. He had 2 line breaks, one of which he did get a try assist to Ardie Savia off of. So I wouldn't mind seeing that man at number 15 once again in this game, which is massive for him because, of course, if you're picking him ahead of Beauden Barrett, even though Beauden isn't very high on some people's priority list in terms of this All Black side, it would still mean that you're having a pretty good season and you've had a pretty good showing to get into the ABs ahead of Beauden Barrett. Now, one thing I've mentioned quite a bit throughout this week, though, is with Beauden Barrett, something that could be offered is that little chip in behind England's rush defence coming forward. That did leave a little bit of a gap, where if you put that chip that Beauden Barrett does offer into that gap, you may find yourself getting a little bit more territory. But I would go with Stephen Perofeta as my number 15 in my All Blacks XV. Now, I should mention this is not the normal lineup prediction video that myself and Rugby Itch are still doing this week. We have actually already filmed it. It will be coming out in a couple days' time. And that one, we always decide on what we think Razor will be going with in his All Blacks side. This one, more so what I would go with. So do let me know, do you agree with the selections that I've made here? Would you make changes of your own? Do let me know in the comments who you would go with in your All Blacks starting XV for the second test match. One thing is for sure, though, if it is anything like the first match, we are in for a very exciting contest. Going to be taking place at Eden Park, 7:05 p.m. kickoff on Saturday night, New Zealand time. It's going to be epic. England, they want to redeem themselves. They want to get that one extra point and add one on top of it and get themselves a win on New Zealand soil. But New Zealand now, they have increased their winning streak up against the English in New Zealand to, I believe it's about 8 matches in a row. Scott Robertson, he has got a 100% winning rate as a coach. Now, of course, most New Zealand coaches have actually started off that way. The only one who hasn't was Ian Foster, who ended up having a draw for his first match in charge. But Scott Robertson, there might be a couple changes compared to what we saw last week. There is also the option that they may go with the same lineup, maybe just the one change of TJ Perenara, try and build that team chemistry, because of course the Rugby Championship is only just around the corner, where you do take on the Springboks, the Pumas, and the Wallabies, who 2 out of the 3 managed to get themselves victories over the weekend. The Springboks beating Ireland, Australia managing to beat Wales, so Joe Schmidt also 100% record as a new coach for the Australians. And then, unfortunately, the only side from the Southern Hemisphere that lost their game in an international fixture was actually Argentina, not being able to get over the line up against the French side that did travel to Argentina, a very young team as well, or the French as they move forward. But like I mentioned, this one, it's a 7:05 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. It's going to be great. We will be doing the commentary on the channel as well, I should mention. So if you are new, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We will also be announcing the All Blacks lineup. Now, last week they did announce it on the Thursday at around 11:30 a.m. New Zealand time. This one, I believe, will be no different. So as soon as that team is announced, we will have that video going up on the channel as well, alongside our lineup prediction, like I mentioned, that myself and Rugby Itch do. Also a preview for the match. We've got plenty coming up for All Blacks versus England. So of course, if you are new, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will see you all for the next one.